Welcome everyone. We're going to start our meeting. It's an inter-board meeting with the town board, planning board, zoning board, and conservation commission to bring up and to discuss a proposed amendment to the Article 20 of Chapter 57 of the Code of the Town of Monroe in the County of Orange and State of New York, according to the following text. Tree preservation. This was put forward by the Conservation Commission. We're going to have an informal discussion between the boards. It's the first step in hopefully moving forward some type of tree code and also some changes to the code in general, and we'll talk about that also. I just want to let everyone know that the exits in the back to the left, my left, and back to the right, and an exit back to my left over here in case we have to vacate the building for any reason. I'd also like to say this is an informal meeting. We don't have a quorum of the town board right now, although hopefully some other members will show up. Supervisor Doles is at the doctor right now. Hopefully he can make it, but in his stead, I'm going to run this meeting. Okay, so I'm just going to ask everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
The flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, just for a little history, we had many of our town residents several years ago, some are in the audience now, talked to the town board about a tree code, possibly strengthening the tree code, as well as some members of the Conservation Committee bringing up that same topic. I myself, Susan Roth, the town planner, Mary Bingham, and Langdon Chapman all worked together on a lot of weekends trying to hammer together more stringent and more legally acceptable tree code for the future of Monroe, and also to update the definitions in the code and bring everything more clearly written for everyone to understand, and some other articles in the tables of the different zones we have in the town we looked at extensively. And now the Conservation Commission has brought forth their desire to move forward with a tree code. At the time I didn't have, as we all know, I pushed for the tree code. We didn't really have the support on the board for it at that time. I did not want to bring it up to any kind of public hearing and vote with it to be beaten and then maybe not come up for a long time. I think perhaps the feeling on the board has changed. There might be some more support, we'll have to see, and also support from the public, which I think hasn't changed. We'll see. But we want to at least bring forth what the Conservation Commission put forth to the town board, and the supervisor and the board made a motion at the last meeting, I guess it was, forget the date, to have a special meeting to at least discuss the tree code. So that's why we're here. The boards will discuss it, and we're going to have more discussions as I've talked to members up here at the board. The planner, Susan Roth, and myself are also reinvesting our time into polishing up the tree code that we have worked on, along with the building inspector, who was invited to this meeting. And we'll move forward from there. But as long as everything is done right, I think this could be a good thing for everyone. So I just want to maybe actually turn the floor over to the Conservation Commission members who are here. John Ebert and Ward Brower up here to my right, and maybe they could discuss a little bit of why they brought it up at this moment, things they want to talk about, and we'll then bounce it around to the different members up here on the panel. So I'll defer to you guys if you want to speak into the mic and talk.
Thank you very much, Jerry and Dan and public out here tonight. We have been evaluating tree codes, I suspect, since I started on the commission, and we've been at it for a long time looking at tree codes, because trees are kind of they're very important in the context of watershed protection. They're important in the context of where we live. We didn't we didn't decide to live in the prairie. We actually live in the mountains, and there's a lot of trees, and trees are an important component of you know, I think why many of us chose being up here in the Hudson Highlands. The fact is, over the years, the Conservation Commission has been shocked at some times, saddened and dismayed by what we term, and what you've probably all seen in the history of this town and others, is clear cutting of an owner prior to subdividing, indiscriminate cutting, timber harvesting, call it what you will. The net result is degradation of the overall environment. So we did evaluate tree codes pretty much regionally. Over the years we've studied tree codes from the state of Connecticut, some of the towns, studied tree codes down in Westchester County, studied tree codes out on Long Island. And then we studied the efficacy of those codes in the context of, you know, whether they held up to challenge and legal challenge. And we found that some were constructed better than others, but we somewhat pieced together our own iteration, if you will, of what we thought might be a strong tree code that would stand up under legal challenge. So that's what you really have before you is an iteration or a tree code that we've pretty much been working on probably over a decade by now. John Uberth, one of our former MCC members, was very engaged in it. Mary Bingham, she lent a hand, and the fact is, in Monroe, we don't really take a look at what you're doing on your property until you come in for a subdivision. And at that point, it's kind of too late some days. Trees are valuable, folks, and they, for many reasons, should be regulated in an environment such as Monroe's, where there is a demand for development and a need to protect an important resource, as well as the other resources that tree, in effect, helps protect. So, Jerry, in a nutshell, I mean, that's basically it, and why we put it on the agenda is because we do have a grant from DEC. We have been studying the nature of trees over the last couple of years. We've tried to bring up the importance of trees. We'd like to plant a few trees at the Marquet Park, at the John DeAngelis Park, and that's really the genesis of why we brought it up. We thought it would be kind of part and parcel to our work with the tree grant and follow up on it. Again, we do feel that it's a loophole in our code. We did a lot to get that code installed, you know, way back when, but a couple of little gaps that we'd like to try to clean up. You got anything to add on that?
Ward Borough Conservation Commission. Just in addition to that, is that in 1990, Gary Abignani, myself, and a couple others convinced the town board to establish a conservation commission. And one of our first jobs was to get a tree code. We realized there was no tree code de facto. We worked very hard on it. We were satisfied with it, but the devil is always in the details. The little Achilles heel of that original code was basically it only applied to the subdivision process. So a developer who had designs on working a piece of property that was heavily wooded, that person, without breaking the law, could go in and, as they say, famous thing, clear cut and get rid of trees. So and that's been what that's in essence what we've been working with or trying to get around for the last 20-some years. And not all developers are unscrupulous. Some actually came in and applied for plans and had to do a tree plan, and actually did work. But unfortunately, there are examples where that doesn't always take place. That's where we're just trying to plug this loophole up. And the recognition, I think Peter Monroe backed me up on this one. He used to be on the town board many years ago, and that he used to comment when he would ride through an Orange Turnpike after coming up from the city, it was like 15 degrees cooler. Why? Because of the tree canopy, nature's air conditioner. And we just wanted to try to perpetuate that rather than let it vanish. Sir?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Ward. That's good points. And John also. I agree with John that once you start looking at these codes, which you obviously put a lot of time into even originally, the more you look at something, and we have the advantage of having a lawyer sit there with us and look at it and how a lawyer would look at it. And no matter how much you try and quote, bulletproof it against problems, it just seems every time you get one answer to a problem, another question arises. It's almost, it's frustrating. It is. But we have worked on it in the past, as you know, and we will continue to work on it. I just wanted to let you guys comment because you put this forth again, and I think the timing, I hope the timing is right for everyone to get together and come to some kind of agreement on it, and push it forth for a, eventually public hearings and get the public comment, and realize, something good for the environment and conservation in this town. Because I will say one thing, even though I work in the city also like Peter did, and even though this area, I will argue, is not rural anymore, it's what I consider to be a suburb of New York City. It's become that way because of highway access and train access. We still have to do our best to preserve things to the best of our ability while still giving people property rights and development rights, all within, carefully constructed limits that legally we can protect.
Just one point on that, and I'm going to back you up 100%, and that is on the environmental issue. It's not just the concern about air and temperature. There's a statistic that's way back in the corners of my mind, and it's been there so long I hate to even mention how many years it's been. But there's a fact out there that potable water, drinking water, in the United States, if you take the total of all freshwater lakes like the Great Lakes, all those lakes, take all the reservoirs, all that combined, that's a drop in the bucket, so to speak, that what's really is in the watershed. In the watershed, trees protect that watershed. And that's when we're primarily a groundwater dependent society, whether we like it or not. So it's part of a resource that we have to protect.
Right. And also, thank you. Also, and the other things it protects against, as we all know, and you know better than most, is the erosion factor too. And that's important to watch out for.
Things like that, they're all in the declaration.
No,
effectively, but when you want to start talking about board feet or the diameter of trees, things like that, I'm sure there'll be differences.
Yes.
Of opinion, and we're all for discussing and negotiating those differences out as long as we can hammer out a reasonable ordinance. We're open. This isn't set in stone.
Right.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, Peter, go ahead.
You're talking. It's sort of ancillary to the tree code in a sense, but you're talking about protecting the environment, and I think for a lot of people who haven't been around here following what's been going on in Monroe since 1990 or previously, the mid-90s were a real boon for the community, and there was some money available, and the town board purchased a lot of acreage over that in a period of time there between like 95, 96, and early 2000. And you can go and dig up a copy of the master plan that was finally approved that we started working on. I started working on it in 2005 with a committee, and we wrote the plan. One of the things that we discovered as we did that is that in the unincorporated town, over 20% of the land in the unincorporated town could be considered to be forever green. It's owned by state, federal, town, village. It's a tremendous amount of property that we have that the town really worked at. We had the money to be able to buy some land. I mean, like the Faber Farm is basically open space and will not be developed. Presumably, it's town-owned property. And the areas around Monbassia Lake are also part of this. So something that there's been real, put your money where your mouth is in this community is doing that to help preserve. And I had for years hoped that we'd have a tree code that would have teeth in it, that would protect properties after they came out of the planning board, and when they get to the point of the actual development taking place. So I encourage you all. I think this is a really good endeavor that you have, and I hope that you can be successful with it.
Thanks, Peter.
Jerry, I don't know if it's helpful, but I had some comments. They're more in the nature of observations than they are criticisms.
Yes, Mike, go ahead.
Okay. Not to put another lawyer's
No,
set of comments in here.
I appreciate it. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Various tree codes have different approaches, and I'm sure you've seen them. They all, or almost all, concentrate on the development process and the limitations placed upon the developer during that process. We've all seen examples of developers, because it's easier and cheaper to remove everything when you're doing your grading, not want to have tree clearing limits and preservation areas. And this clearly does that and gives the authority to the planning board to require that planning. Many tree codes stop there, unless the area in question has some significance to the community as a whole in terms of view shed or something of the kind. This law goes beyond that, not a criticism, an observation, and continues those controls on the owners of the lots even after they have purchased them, thus prohibiting them from creating lawns and open space. In doing that, because it's long-lasting, if that's clearly the direction the town board wants to go, the town may want to give some consideration to allowing, beyond the 6 trees per year that can be removed, allowing the removal, because I don't think it's in here unless I missed it, diseased, damaged, dangerous, invasive, because it is in there? Okay, I just missed it.
Mike, let me clarify that. There are 3 versions that I know about here. And 2 of them I read, it's in there. I don't know about the 3rd.
Okay, I gave it a quick read, so you may well
That's a valid point.
be correct.
And maybe, Mike, in that context, maybe there are certain zones where we may not want to enforce. Maybe certain zones, UR-M maybe, or where it may be moot.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it up as an issue that we recognize what we're doing and give some thought to that. There's also a prohibition during the course of review before the planning board of tree removal beyond perk testing, and I'm not questioning that. You may, however, want or enable the planning board to give some kind of limited permit, because there are situations where some greater degree of clearing may be required. For removal, we had an issue with the planning board where there was an older dump, a landfill that was on a parcel, and it would have been good to have a flexible law that would have allowed some kind of development review process, limited permit that could be given to enlarge beyond just perk testing. Just a suggestion. There may be a need to do borings or something that would take other equipment that has to get beyond just the areas. So maybe some flexibility there in section 5782.
Just one point on that, Mike. I have no qualms about that. I just would like to have either not just one person, such as a code enforcement officer, make that decision. Maybe go by a tree council so that you get give and take on this. I know I've been in government a long time, and that give and take process, which is what makes or breaks a
I was suggesting the planning board, not the building inspector, but however however the town feels it should be
Well,
done.
I don't even know if some of the planning people have word when it comes to conservation, but I mean, some codes have referred to a tree commission, some refer to a conservation commission. That may be one of the articles we may want to implement in this, so we have some guidance. So it's not decision by a code enforcement officer or just one.
Okay. In 5783 B4, the law requires a detailed specification of the trees to be removed in the areas where there is disturbance. What it doesn't require is any listing or description in that level of detail of the trees in the areas to be preserved. And in some ways that, you may want to rethink that whether it's upside down, because if they're going to be removed, is it necessary to itemize them all if they're to be removed for the development? But in the areas that are to be preserved, unless you have some kind of method of memorializing what's there, how would you know what is removed?
To answer that question, back in 1990, when the original tree code, which is on the books now, the planning board was very cooperative with us, and the first project, I can't remember the developer, I know where it is, the planning board required an extensive tree inventory. And it found that it was so prohibitively expensive that it was onerous. And then we since evolved a process of really where you would go through with people who more or less are on can just make a quick walk-through, relatively quick, make an assessment. They don't go through one. The first tree code, you can ask Gary. The first one they hired a forester to come in there, and he had every twig on that thing. Well, you can make generalizations if you know.
Right,
Well,
but this law,
on the point.
yeah.
Again, it does mention detailing the number of trees to be removed, % of total stands to be removed, and how many trees will remain after construction.
Okay.
It's also part of that sentence.
But the adjectives detail,
Yes.
the concentration is on the area of removal, which, if they're to be removed, is not the area that's important as,
Right.
as some method of memorializing what's to be preserved. Just an observation.
Well, that should be in the plan, I would think.
Well, I don't know if this calls for it, but you may want to rethink that.
Right.
In 5784
John, if I could on that one, just that, I think part of that too, Bob O'Neill with the Conservation Commission.
Come on and sit up here.
I was just saying that's partly,
You can sit up here.
I think part of that was to allow for potential mitigation for replacement, so we know what was removed, so that's what that was about.
The requirement for the plantings of street trees is to have them in the right-of-way line. And I don't know what you mean by line, but I guess you mean within the town's right-of-way. There is a proposal by the highway superintendent and the town board to outlaw the planting of trees in the highway right-of-way. And I only pointed out as an issue that may need to be examined, whether the town wants them there or not, because it means the town's the one that's got to take care of them. 5787D dictates that Orange and Rockland must notify the town before they cut down trees. I don't know how you can govern them here, but I will tell you that other communities that I've represented have been able to enter into cooperative agreements with Orange and Rockland, and perhaps the town has, where before they do any of their trimming on trees that are on lines, they do an inventory, they do a walkthrough with the town, they identify, they describe where they're going to cut, and they make an effort for those trees that have to be badly damaged with their beat cuts to make some effort to allow replanting in certain areas. So I don't think you can dictate all over here.
Well, maybe what we
But
could
the
say
town may
in
wanna
that
enter into an
clause
agreement.
is that the town, enable the town board to enter into a memorandum of understanding
Yeah,
with
that would be
utilities.
helpful.
to,
And lastly, I'll need to double check
contact
it.
notification.
I'm not so sure that you can impose a $1,000 fine, but I'll look into that. I think the state law sets the amount that a municipality can set for violation of its own code chapters, and I don't think it's that high, but I'll find out.
Can I ask a question on the fine?
Yeah.
Fines, I find, it's fraught with a lot of peril. Because dollar values change. And it means you'd be constantly upgrading the thing. And I don't know if that's a direction you want to go in. If it's more of an incentive, or however you want to say, an inducement for them not to violate and cut down trees if you had, where they had to replace the tree, rather than just pay a fine. Because that value will adjust to the economic times. The other ones are almost impossible. You're never always out of sync, within a matter of weeks sometimes.
Maybe even another punitive method might be to prevent or prohibit them from applying for subdivision for 5 years or a certain term.
This isn't the NCAA.
Yeah.
I have, in the context of SECRA, had findings that required the developer, if he removed or damaged a tree in a preservation area, to be required to replace that with plantings of equivalent basal area. And when you use that measure, it's rather significant as to what the replanting is required. It's not just a sapling for an old tree. It's much more than that. And I believe under SECRA you do have the authority to do that. Whether you can carry that forward to the lot owner later, because that's the issue I started with, is another matter. But you're right, or the fine goes into the coffers of the government. It is not earmarked for replanting. It is the idea is it would discourage people and punish them for their transgression, but it doesn't fix the problem.
You could always look into doing both. Do both.
Well, again, this is
No, I'm just saying.
something up for discussion.
Right.
guys.
No, it's a good point. It's a good point. Good point.
We're talking about developers and subdivisions. Now, as I understand it, the tree code would also apply to individual homeowners.
Correct.
And they could take down any trees that were diseased or, were dead. Is there anything in here that would require, once you took down a dead tree, to plant a new one? Or should that be added?
I don't think that was the intent, and it's a good point. Again, that's where I think you need to refer to an arborist, professional arborist, a forester, or something like that. Because some of these trees you may try to put in and find out they're problematic. They're already on, practically on the endangered species list, and putting in the same, maybe just exercise of futility. But I think when it gets to that, if you have trees that are dying, it's good always to get a professional opinion. Why did it die? That's always what you want to find out. And you find some just die of old age, some are endemic, some are just preview of things to come. But just to arbitrarily say, well, we're going to that a homeowner has to put that same type exact tree back, it may not be the most prudent thing for the homeowner or for the environment or anyone. So some of these things, I don't think you can do in legislative intent and cover all bases. The human element's going to have to have to have a philosophy that we have good people out there who are professionals who will render a good decision. And that's what I think you have to put your faith in, rather than have a document that's bulletproof and says, okay, there's no flexibility.
Yeah, but I think we could enhance this tree code by making some specifics about homes.
Well, there is
maybe to call in an arborist or because I know the tree service comes and they cut down your tree. I mean, that's their job. Then anything you get from them is almost uninformed.
But I think we could clarify under that section 5785, activities permitted by right. That we could put language in there clearly enabling a homeowner to deal with any diseased, damaged trees. That basically gives the homeowner the ability to deal with a tree that might be creating a hazard.
It should be very clear what the homeowner is allowed to do.
We can enhance that section.
And also, it should be something that our homeowners support, that they think makes sense and willing to live with.
Gentlemen, I don't want to be so restrictive on the homeowner. I mean, we have a limitation on how many trees a homeowner can cut down on their personal property per year. But to try and make it, as you said before, bulletproof, or to make it so restrictive for the homeowner that they're afraid to chop down, anything that may be in the way, or maybe it may be too close to the house. Maybe they feel that with the last storm it may have fallen over on the house. most people
or
don't
branch
wanna
in their
have,
car.
most people don't wanna have a clear cut. They move up here for the greenery.
Right, and at that point, I've two different versions. One says you can take 6 trees down per year, one says 5 trees. When you get to that range, that's really a lot of trees coming down before you need any permits at all
Right.
in 1 year's time. So it's not really that drastic when you look at it.
One other thing I wanted to clarify, does this apply to the town outside the villages, or does it apply to the villages also?
No, remember, this is the town code, unincorporated.
Town
part of the
outside
town.
the villages. So
Town, and I presume town, well,
and
town
then
on property.
the 3 villages would cast their own code and follow their own code.
No.
Well, it's the town of Monroe code, so.
Oh, so
The villages, no, we're still a home rule state as far as I recognize.
Okay, you're saying it wouldn't include the villages?
Would not.
No,
Okay,
no,
I just want the public to know that.
Town of Monroe, not the unincorporated.
The town outside
The
the village.
unincorporated town of Monroe. You can't tell the specific villages that they have to have your exact same code. They hopefully will handle things properly in their own municipality.
right, you're leading by example. Hopefully, if it's a good code, the other municipalities will follow suit and do the same thing.
Plus, there are different densities within villages sometimes as opposed to towns, as we all know.
That's true.
And,
The only thing I would, oh, go ahead.
here's another oddity that might come up. I mean, people are putting solar up, and there might be a tree that has to come down in order for the solar.
You should have said a tree. Remember, you got 5 to 6, it's
Okay.
pretty flexible. Unless you're in a
One tree.
super
Okay.
dense stand, which most homeowners
Just
are
want to
not.
say that out loud so everybody knows that.
Yeah. And again, you may be right, you may find some pieces of property where there are a maturing setting. It's been, because most of this, when Gary and I grew up here, he's younger than I, but it was mostly farm fields. And a lot of that has been taken over by growth, and you see new growth. You see some areas where the density of trees are quite close. So taking 6 trees down would just make only a little footprint. And that would have to then say, okay, I'm going to do a solar panel, I need this sun access to my roof or panel area. That's, again, you should refer back to, as I said, not one person. I still think you should have some kind of committee that would make a rational decision. You've got to work with the homeowner, and you got to try and do the best you can possibly do. But
That
that's,
makes sense.
Well, after that comment of it making sense, I understand where you're coming from. I do have a little bit of a difference on that with the committee, because sometimes committees take more time than you would think in answering certain questions just by the nature of a committee. And I would feel that our building department, code enforcement officer or 2 that we have, could have, there is another building inspector who's part-time in our building department. If they were to take a couple of courses in certain things with the trees, could make some basic judgments on things. That way, the homeowner could go right to the building department and get hopefully a quick visit and things taken care of on a more expedient nature for the homeowner. Just another way of looking at it that I think we've got to discuss.
I don't discredit what you say, but I also say I don't want to diminish the qualifications some people have as arborists, foresters, or whatever. And some of those guys, women too, who take those, or code enforcement officers will take a course, 1-day seminar or whatever, does not make them a botanist, tree expert, or anything else. I'm just saying, I would rather have more than just one opinion on that.
I think on that too, it's our job to make this user-friendly. And I think with your input, we can come up with something that is clear. I think that it would be incumbent on something like the Conservation Commission or a good consultant to come up with a specimen tree list. Some of our more important trees should be categorized. Some trees that have special significance to the town of Monroe, maybe they could be put on this endangered tree list type thing, but just some, because that's important. But again, this isn't meant to be, overbearing on the public. It's really meant to help the public understand that we don't want indiscriminate tree cutting. I mean, we're willing to work with anything. But if the code enforcement officer at least, you know, sees it in the code as the way it should be, you know, their whole job is looking at code and interpreting and enforcing. So, you know, I would think Ben or any other code enforcement officer, if we gave them the right recipe, could do their job effectively.
Yes, I agree. And, you know, we'll work together with everyone on that. Susan and I had spoken to Ben on numerous occasions, and Susan had meetings after that with the building inspector, getting his input on what he thought was, you know, you're going to look at a building inspector, he's going to give you more of what he considers to be practical in his world of inspection and code enforcement. So it's good to get both sides of the picture and come to some kind of agreement, usually in the middle somewhere. And it was good to hear his input. And while he did support, from what we gathered, the concept, he just wanted to make sure it was something that could be taken care of properly by his department without becoming time-consuming to a crazy degree, and also look out for the best interests of the environment.
I mean, they got enough to do.
Yeah, no, he does, and he made us aware of that also.
You know, they do make you aware of
Yes,
it.
yes, they did, and he did, and we understand that.
Go ahead.
But at the same point in time, he was very receptive to the concept that we set the codes and he enforced them, so.
Have a seat.
Have a seat, you're on the Conservation Commission.
Not to drag it on, but I think this is a really important point because we want to bring what expertise we have to bear on the situation. And I think one of the things, this is a great point that we should go back and forth on. Maybe we do have some type of tree commission, and it has when there's an application or a request for a decision to be made, it has a time frame on it. And after that time frame is expired, if there hasn't a decision to be been made at that point, then maybe it defers to you know, an individual to make that. So, but I think if we have that, if we all recognize there's a certain time frame, this whole thing won't work if it's going to just go up the works and the process is going to you know, there's going to be, you know, a wrench in the gears. We don't want that to happen, but I think something along those lines we can come up with a compromise. But I think it's really important to have several people looking at these things. If one person is just making a decision, when things get routine, things get overlooked.
This code doesn't really have a permitting process beyond the subdivision and site plan process. So once you buy your lot, the way this is written now, it's 6 trees a year. There's no ability to get a permit to take down more. That's final. That's it.
Right.
You want to get a subdivision, then you go for a subdivision.
Right. Or construction activities could permit you to get a permit. But if you're just living in the house and you want to take down trees, there's no process by which you can get an approval.
Well, because we felt that was pretty well addressed in the existing code. Moving forward, there were loopholes
Can't hear you.
that you can consider. You know, that's why we didn't really make this take down 6 trees, you gotta go get a permit. In fact, you already have the chapter.
No, but if you wanted to take down 8,
Yeah,
you can't do it.
that's right.
Okay.
So this doesn't replace the current code, it works in conjunction with?
I'd say it's inclusive. Part of the existing code is really part of this code. Because the planning process is still in there. You gotta go for the planning board, you tree plan, the whole 9 yards. So it's dovetailed in pretty much.
Some of that's alluded to in the earlier sections.
Right.
I apologize for being late. But, I had a question about 5783, subsection A, subdivisions. The second sentence, where it is anticipated that the developer will not proceed to the site plan stage, the planning board may waive certain segments of the tree plan. I wasn't clear about that. You know, a lot of times the applicant doesn't tell you he's not going to go to the site plan, it just never comes back. That's something we may want to rework.
I see it right here.
That's on page 4. 5783.
Developers required to submit the
Day one?
Day one.
Day one.
Day one, or day one.
Second sentence.
There is only for townhouse, condominium, multifamily house developments that would ever apply.
Well, we don't,
I think really what we're talking here is, you know, in the case where a developer is submitting a DEI, it's a draft environmental impact statement. It's rather large subdivision. But if they're not proceeding to that point, maybe there are smaller areas of the subdivision the developer may want to move on. And I think that's something where we're trying to, as I say, we didn't want to put any gears or work in the works.
yeah.
So that was language that would more or less provide the planning board with latitude to overstep the overall subdivision, 10 stages of it, 4-stage subdivision.
Yeah, if a subdivision's going to be constructed in phases, I would certainly
Yeah.
suggest that we have something in writing that says that there is to be no work at all done on any of the subsequent stages, just one at a time. phases.
Right.
You know, we had a fairly recent development in the town, I guess within the last 3 years, over on Hilltop. And I guess that's why when you guys offered the tree plan, I jumped on it right away.
Yep.
That was pretty much a disaster from the point of view of vegetation. The entire place was clear cut, and I know in the approved plans, we suggested, and we didn't suggest, it was stated that you must retain trees that are outside the perimeter of the house itself, and they were all gone. And at that point, all we had to stand on was the site plan. Had it been in the code at that point in time, you know, we could have made more of a secret of it. And that's the thing.
Well, I think that's
Some of
where it
those
gets
developers-
confusing. You get a site plan, the guy will say, here's where the house is.
Yeah,
And then 2 weeks later, or months later, or years later, it's over here, but he's already cut over here because you let him, or nobody's looking.
yeah,
And now he's got cut over here because, well, you know, the engineer thought the driveway would do best here, or maybe I didn't perk there.
yeah.
Yeah, and before you know it, you've got a scrubbed up lot. So in these cases under subdivision, in a way, you know, to some extent, we are changing your existing subdivision. So that needs to have some
Yeah, I'm just wondering,
attention.
is it worth the effort to get it all coordinated, to rewrite that entire section?
It may be better time spent leaving that
Just
where it is
put
and
this in
focus on
place.
something that takes care of what we
Okay.
call the obvious loopholes.
Let me pose a hypothetical, because I think sometimes that helps you decide how this law would apply. Assume I own 100 acres of land. I want to divide off 1 acre from the 99 and build a house. I think the way this is written, I'd have to inventory the 99. I don't know that you want it to reach that level. Now, there's some language that suggests some flexibility, but it really, the flexibility is in what gets replaced. I'm not saying that's your intent, but I wonder whether the language, often it helps to come up with hypotheticals like that. That flexibility may need to be in here. Maybe the language would do it, but I'm not so sure it does, and I think you'd probably want it to. I don't think you
I'm
want
sure it does not.
Okay.
And
Okay.
again, you know, that's why.
No, it's not a criticism,
throwing
it's
it
just
out,
an observation.
Because we're not lawyers. I wish we were some days.
It's not that much fun.
Again, you're right. But exactly, and that's a valid point.
Dennis, the point you made, that example you gave, the hilltop,
Yeah,
that's a case in point. That was like an an evolving situation, and if you follow that through, if you remember back, when we got the developer to do replanting, remember?
Yes.
We actually brought in an outside, not the code enforcement officer, we got someone who was really a professional. That's why I'm strongly keep pushing that point. Code enforcement officer, fine, they got their codes, they follow the code book. Sometimes you need to reach beyond the little paragraph they're reading. That's why you need to bring in some professionals.
I agree. And I also like the idea of the stating the size and the type of tree too. With very specific dimensions.
But now, if I remember correctly, if I remember correctly, Ward, in that kind of a situation, the developer who made, let's just call it the mistake, paid to have that expert come in and do that.
Oh, yes.
So that's the difference too, you gotta look at it.
And once the word gets out, you know, you transgress a little bit, it can be very costly. It's cheaper to do a good job the first time rather than...
And the point I'm bringing forth is that the issue that the building inspector had before you get into developments is it's cheaper for a private homeowner if the building inspector could do the inspection for dead trees, dangerous trees, different situations. Maybe we have to look into putting it in different contexts where it would be the building inspector, and in large developments it would be an expert, because that way an individual homeowner won't be saddled with hiring an arborist, which can be somewhat expensive, and from what I understand, can take some time to get an arborist to the site if it's just a single home.
I think my colleague sort of made a suggestion. If you could run it by us in lieu of a tree commission, we're the next thing, do a tree commission, and set us into a time frame where we give advice. We're not judge and jury. We give some advice to the code enforcement officer and proceed along that line. But so you expand the input and do it in a timely fashion. I understand the timely fashion.
Right.
I know how government works.
Right.
Or doesn't.
Timely fashion is important.
Operative work.
The other thing is that when you look at that situation that we were talking about here, not only was there replanting, there was also fines too, as far as I remember.
I think you're right.
So it was one of the times on the board where I remember Sandy Leonard was saying she felt, you know, everyone worked together and got the best result possible after the transgression happened, so.
Yes, the government did rise to the occasion
Yeah,
on that occasion.
on that one we did.
Yes, it did.
Everyone was pretty egregious.
Yeah, well, everyone was outraged, you're right.
Yeah.
So if I could make a suggestion, I mean, obviously there is input that is very, very valuable to us. And I don't know if you want to use this as our iteration as something to reference on or edit upon, but you know, at some point we should be circulating some language. Mike, if you're aware of, you know, some provisions that need bolstering and you have some ideas, I'd love to see them. You know, as well as planning board, zoning folks are always up against people looking to, you know, effectively do what they got to do. And we would be more than happy to, you know, synchronize them and try to come up with frequently asked questions, iterations for the next step, more or less. Because I seem to understand there's at least 2 or 3 different ordinances hanging around here, and you know, but I think we all agree that something substantive could result if we put our minds together and hashed it out.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with you on that. Rick?
No, that was Peter.
Oh, I'm sorry, Peter, you had a comment?
Yeah, if I may. One of the things that always bothered me, John, was that we have applicants in front of the planning board for so long, and the planning board does this incredible job of getting everything nailed down and the absolute best site plan for the project. It seems to me that the day those plans go out the door, that a lot of that work just disappears because there's no real teeth in how you enforce the site plans. And I'm hoping that somehow within this code, you guys are going to address that. I've heard you talking about it a little bit. So I think that's really important. Why make the applicant spend all this time? Why spend all this money to come up with absolutely the best plan that's out there, and then let it just go out the window the day that somebody goes in and starts cutting the trees and building the house? Where the planning board had not intended that it should be, and that happens a lot.
Okay, thank you, Peter. I was gonna look to, Rick, did you have a comment? I thought
Well, if something like that's going to occur, just like you said before, Jerry, not only will they have to reestablish what they chopped down, but also a fine as well. So I think that just may cover, I think, the situation that you may be referring to. I mean, we have to have some flexibility. Maybe we can also write in that consultation with the Conservation Commission to advise planning board on what action should take, should also be in there as well. If that's okay with you, I don't mean to put conservation on you know, in a position, but if it's that egregious of an issue where someone just goes in to clear cut, that we can consult you, you can refer to maybe 2 or 3 professionals in the area and give some kind of guideline as to what either the town board, planning or zoning should do at that point. In other words, not to say it would be an absolute, but it would give us a much better idea of how to address somebody who just decided to clear cut everything and what would be the best action to take. I think,
I have no problem with that.
you know, just as a consulting,
Right.
because you're another branch of government.
Well, that's what we've been doing all these years, right, guys?
I was gonna say, we got to make it so it's easier for them to follow this
Yeah.
than to not follow. I mean,
Right.
that's where it has to go. And then what you're getting at, Rick, I agree. What's the enforcement? It comes out of the planning board. These guys do a great job of making sure it's a good plan. Then, you know, who's on these guys? Now, you know, sometimes neighbors turn people in, you know, but I'd rather not have people turn in. I'd rather have the developer going in there and saying, we gotta follow this plan. It's a
don't
good
think-
plan, we gotta follow it, and that way we don't get a situation like we were talking about before where, yeah, hey, there's penalties worked out, they you know, they got their comeuppance on that, but all the trees are gone. You know, that's what we're trying to make it, we want a plan, and that's why it's great having all this input, because bringing up good scenarios, good what-ifs, you know, kind of run it through some scenarios and fine-tune this thing, maybe use this as a starting template.
But you know,
Maybe find another one that's just as good.
you know, like any law on the books, that goes for parking, that goes for garbage, that goes for anything. You know, John Q. Public, you know, the general public at large is our best eyes and ears for anything. And so if a neighbor does call up and say, you know, they're starting to clear cut and I'm wondering what's going on over here, I mean, we can't be all places at all times. And a lot of times we do depend on the public at large to call up and let us know what's going on. We do that for water leaks. Sometimes we don't catch them right away. Someone will call up about that. What I'm simply saying is that, you know, we can put as many laws on the books as possible, but when you have a public at large, when you have a citizenry that really cares about this, they're going to be taking it, you know, it's going to be enforceable. We can't enforce it if nobody reports anything and nobody cares.
Well, I think so, and it's like the noise ordinance, you know, unless there's an ordinance, there's no way you can call up state troopers saying, you know, complain about my neighbor.
Guitar player.
You know, that guitar player.
Yeah, drum player.
Yeah. So you know, clearly, if the ordinance said you're cutting up more than 6 trees, you don't got a permit. somebody next door seeing that going on has a valid point, be able to call up even a state trooper and say, geez, my neighbor is breaking my town law. Can you come up and maybe, you know, step between us? Give us a little time to think about this?
Well, it sounds familiar, shades of Meadow and Flynn, I guess, but,
Exactly.
you know, if we didn't have the good people in that development step up and say, hey, what's going on here? And then that's what kicked off a lot of this, why we're all sitting here today. Because those people sat up and said, wait a second, they're starting to clear cut. Now, at that time, I don't think we had anything on the books that would have prevented that.
Nothing is.
There was,
delineated as this.
right,
No,
nothing
we actually
like that, and that's what really, that's what has us all here together in a sense right now today.
Well, actually, we were working on the tree code before that situation came up, and the fans in the audience now, she was one of the members of the community who came to the meetings about that situation. And like John said earlier, you know, we have a tree code that was made by people who cared, and there were loopholes, like later on we found out. And, you know, what it comes down to, even though we all have to respect individual property rights, and some people might not agree with a permitting process for individual property owners, but, you know, we've also worked on this tree code further on than this version, and we've come to the conclusion that maybe we would have a very inexpensive permit that you would go to the town and building department and let them know you're going to cut trees down, and just have a very cheap permit. Say, I'm going to start cutting some trees down just so the town's aware of it. And that way the homeowner, the neighbor, if the neighbor calls the building inspector and starts a ruckus, the building inspector can say, wait a minute, the homeowner came in, paid for, you know, whatever the amount of money is, you know, relatively inexpensive, obviously, not trying to hurt anyone, and just enough to cover the review of the building inspector paperwork. And the building inspector will tell the neighbor, calm down, you know, this is under control. If he cuts more than he's put in for or she's put in for, then we'll have an issue. But at least then everyone understands what's going on. And, you know, as the building inspector told me, the neighbor versus neighbor stuff you want to control. You don't want people getting excited and at each other's throats, so to speak, as he put it, over nothing. So, you know, this process has been worked on. And the thing that struck me from what John was saying when we went over the tree code years ago is you may, as I was saying about individual property rights, you know, if someone owns a small lot, you know, and has a few trees on it, you might think it's onerous to get a permit. But there are some large individual landowners in the town who own enough of a tree population on their land that if they go out there, as has happened, it actually is like a clear-cutting process they go through right on their own property. So that's why we have to take this to the next level, to prevent that in the future.
I agree. Your point there, as long as it can be incorporated into the code,
Right.
I don't know how you enforce it, but it should be revenue neutral. Because when we have to file a permit, sometimes government says, okay, use that as a source of income. So I have no qualms as long as it's revenue neutral,
Yeah.
the cost is down to the bare minimum and it doesn't become a burden on the taxpayers.
And the building inspector agrees with that.
The Town of Monroe Code does have provision for what's called a public improvement security agreement. In those cases where the planning board identifies a particular project as requiring that. That includes inspection fees, performance security, restoration security. In appropriate projects, the planning board could identify these as in need of that, and it entitles the town to hire an inspector for the job, even beyond the building inspector or the town engineer. And if trees was an issue that could be included in those agreements, it could be included.
What article is that?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's entitled Public Improvement Security Agreements. We could tie into it from
I'll
here.
look into it.
Yeah, I think when the planning board is finished with the site plan and the developer got approval to go ahead, what they do after that, I mean, if it's beyond the scope of the planning board, it comes under the scope of the town board. And we should have an inspector on any kind of, any project like that. If it's agreed to over the years they're at the planning board, it should continue once they leave the planning board. And I don't, a loophole like that, you know, we're going to have to do something about. And also, the planning board uses the Conservation Commission as a resource. You're there very often, and thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, I was just going to ask, anyone else have any comments or suggestions? We have also a few members of the entertainment. Suggestions, comments, questions? Gary?
John, you've done a wonderful job, or you've done a wonderful job on this. It has been working in the shoots for a long time. You do hit some nails right on the head. Planning board does do a time-consuming job making sure that everything is more or less in place before final approval is granted. Mr. Donnelly goes over things, kind of guides us through the legal end of it very well. And we have been finding that with the fact that more inspection fees are available, not only the engineer but the building inspector has the opportunity to go out and visit the site more often than has happened in the past. But like it was just mentioned, there is that little window of time, the time prior to getting final approval, where somebody can go out onto his property while he's going through the subdivision stage, and sometimes start harvesting. It may not be a lot, but it could be little pockets here, little pockets there. And it turns out that usually it could be around a wetland area on a steep slope. These are areas that you want to try and preserve the most, and those are the ones that usually get harvested first. The other part of the process is right after subdivision approval. Usually he's going to have to start going to the building inspector before he does any kind of opening up a way to get into his parcel. And I think that should be incorporated a little bit more strongly in the code, so that the building inspector has a little bit more bite to make sure that nothing gets disturbed on the property before proper permits are filed for start of construction. Outside of that, you guys did great.
Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, I think you did address specifically in the early stages of the site plan development, clearing for well testing and clearing for perk testing. We were very specific about roadways in and et cetera, so that also is a good step forward. Because given the opportunity, clear cut could easily happen at that point in time.
We've seen that.
Yeah.
I don't know, one other question. I don't think it's sort of in this code, but we did have a section that was circulated around on the Timber Harvesting Act. Okay. Yeah, and that, it's the buffer zone. I have a question about on that one, because in the deciduous forest, which we primarily are in this area, 50-foot buffer is meaningless in the wintertime. It's like Venetian blinds in the open position once the leaves fall off. You know, so that maybe needs to be expanded rather than go beyond just 50 feet.
I think that was, I think that dovetailed with our wetlands buffer, 50 feet. So, you know, if you feel the need to widen that, I mean, but, you know, as I say, we're just trying to get something for everybody. I didn't want to be too overbearing, but, you know, Ward has a valid point. It's never enough.
If you're timber harvesting, okay, that's the operative word. Doesn't mean clear cut. There should be some vegetation. You're just supposed to be going in there taking the valuable timber, the old valuable timber, the mature valuable timber, supposedly leaving behind the replacement stuff. That often does not take place. In the essence and the process of removing, a lot of things disappear. You know, and that's always a Achilles heel on there.
Good point. Does anyone else down here have a comment? Okay, I was going to turn it over then. A lot of these points have been expanded upon and I think made more easy to understand in some of the work that Susan Roth has done, along with Like I said earlier, myself, Mary Bingham, and Langdon Chapman, one of the previous town attorneys, and Susan would like to make a few comments. We have another version, as John mentioned, and I was talking to Gary earlier about it. We have another version that's being ironed out. We had gotten to a certain point with it, and then we decided that the interest for the tree code had sort of waned, especially in our opinion on the town board end, so we didn't want to invest more of the taxpayer money into planner review and refinement of a tree code if it wasn't going to be soon voted upon or acted upon. But now that we seem to have a renewed interest, I think on the town board end, and from some of the people in the community, I'd like to thank the Conservation Commission for pushing it forth. We appreciate that. And that shows more community support, not just something that the town board wanted to push. We take that you have considered it and thought it was a good time for it, and I happen to agree with you. But Susan has been working on it a little recently now, since the issue came back up. And Susan and I will actually be meeting for a couple hours tomorrow about it. And when we get this just a little more refined, we're going to get versions to everyone on the 4 boards for them to peruse and to review. And it all did stem from the original documents. It just got to be, I think, like I said earlier, when you go over it with an attorney, you realize how little you know about the law, you know, and then they refine it for you to tell you how to protect the town and to actually, in a lot of ways, by writing the code more efficiently, you actually streamline the actual process itself and protect yourself. When I said earlier, Rick made a comment about it, when I said earlier about bulletproof, I meant for lawsuits from people who develop and would be doing larger projects. And if you make it fair to them, they have less of a reason to sue you. So that's what we were trying to do also. So Susan, do you want to make any comments?
Okay. All right. Okay, so I just, this version of the code was incorporated into the one that we're currently working on. And there were some changes that I made, especially that we agreed upon. I said, and these are some of the points that Ben brought up too when I met in his office. The first one was the number of trees. He said that he felt that the way that the code was written, it was possible to cut down 6 trees in December and 6 trees in January for a total of 12 trees, no matter what their size. And if you think about it from a larger perspective, I mean, I live on a residential lot. I have 20% slopes in my backyard. I have a drainage area on one side that's town-owned, and that's practically every tree on my back lot. So that's one thing you have to consider when you're going forward. So Ben actually thought that if you're really trying to protect trees and slopes, then you require a permit for even 1 tree. But you make it easier for the building department to be able to administer that 1 tree. And then you require arborists when you have multiple trees, in bigger areas, so you understand more clearly the impact on the environment. Because obviously, if I were to cut down every tree on a slope piece of my property, then I could do significant damage to my neighbor down the hill with the continuing erosion of my property. So we have to kind of guard against that. And the other thing that we kind of changed was the process of how you evaluate it in subdivision. I believe in form-based zoning. Basically what you do is you have the raw piece of property, you evaluate it on a holistic, in such a way that you know where all the trees are, you know where the wetlands are, you know where the steep slopes are, you kind of draw circles around there, and what's left is what you have to develop with. And you bring it closer to that, and that's much better for the environment because it leads to more stability and cleaner water coming off of the sloped areas into the little streams and riverlets and water courses, and benefits everybody, including the wildlife. So, and it makes for a prettier subdivision, and it leads to more consideration of cluster zoning and things like that. So you are more protective of the environment in that way, and I think that's to everybody's benefits, and I think it's also good for the aesthetics, people enjoy living around areas that aren't developed. And especially in like housing and things like that, they like, you know, I happen to like my backyard. But somebody else, if I sold the house, somebody else might have designs on putting a pool back there. So you have to kind of protect against that. So,
So if you don't mind, Monroe, the thing I quite don't understand is, you have a subdivision proposal, say 50 acres, you're doing 25 homes, 1.5 acre lot, whatever, 1 acre zoning, and before the subdivision approval, you've made that developer prepare a tree plan.
well, not really. I would call it, I mean, in Goshen, they have this type of idea incorporated into their code. They call it conservation analysis. And we did kind of that when we did Shea subdivision. Remember, it was platted as a conventional subdivision with conventional roads. And what we did was the planning board walked the site. We kind of put an outline around the wetlands. And we defined the critical areas within that plan in order to be able, for the purposes of preserving them. That included even like some of the rock walls.
Understood, but once the subdivision was approved,
Once the subdivision is approved,
and the lots were developed,
right?
then effectively the owner subsequently, now it's just his parcel.
Right.
And nothing necessarily prevented that owner from doing anything with any
Well,
trees
but-
on that
But
lot.
then the plus side is about, isn't it, Mary, help me on this, is it about 50% of the site? 50% about 50% of the site was preserved.
Was preserved.
And so you're trading the benefit of having these large areas preserved, which is better for the environment, for a little bit more development on an individual and smaller lot. So you have to kind of weigh that against the development, you know, you have to weigh that in the development process.
And that you do in the subdivision process.
Exactly.
This is a code outside the subdivision process.
Right.
And I think that's where you have to kind of focus.
Right, but the thing is when you create, you want to address all those different scenarios. You want to address what the homeowner does, what the site plan person does, because I think that also trees should be put on site plans, just like wetlands. It's much easier now to be able to identify like
I don't
on a site plan now. They
argue
just
that
go
at
out,
all.
they just go out and they shoot it with a GPS and it appears on their map. So I think the argument for saying that it's too cost prohibitive for most engineers to be able to do this, they have the training to be able to do basic identification of most species of trees. It's not that hard.
I understand, Susan, but again, I'm trying to narrow the focus here to the property owner.
Okay.
Not necessarily the developer.
We're working that way slowly. So anyway, so if you do this, the planning board has the information they need to be able to have a positive impact on the environment through seeker. So without that information, then it gets harder to be able to understand what the impacts are. Now, okay, so let's move to the individual homeowner. The reason why we suggested that only one tree be allowed is because just that scenario, you get 6 one year and 6 the other, and they could be in December and January, and you basically clear cut a 1 acre or half acre lot. So that's not good for the environment. So it doesn't have to be an onerous process. And I do believe that you can train the building inspector or write it into the code in such a way that it's clear what a diseased or broken tree is. You also have to include provisions for people who may want to poison the tree on their property and claim that it's dead. And that's not in this code. So we have to figure out a way to do that. But I think that it's also important the way that the definitions define a tree and define the protection area has to be changed, because instead of just 12 inches or an inch for every foot off the diameter of the tree, I think to the drip line is easier. It's easier to enforce because You can go out there and immediately tell where the canopy is and how far it reaches. And when you do that, even if you do a 12-inch tree and you're protecting it to the drip line of the tree, you're going to catch all the little trees underneath it. So effectively, you're cutting out areas that should be forested and you're keeping them forested. So, and that's I think, the simpler you make it, the clearer that it's made to the building, from the building inspector's point of view, then easier it is for them to be able to be helpful in enforcement. So, you know, I do believe in arborists and things like that, but you have to also understand that if you have like a homeowner having to come out and get an arborist to certify that the tree is dead, you're probably adding anywhere from $200 to $600 a visit, because the guys that cut down the trees for you in your yard, they're not arborists. They probably know what a tree looks like. They know what a dead tree looks like, but they're tree cutters. If they told everybody how to save trees, they'd be out of business. So I think that it's important to try to figure out a way to where, like, the homeowner that has a dangerous tree that's leaning close to their house, or they need to do something about a tree that's growing in an inappropriate place and affecting their sewer line, that they have some sort of way to be able to easily go through the process. And one other thing that I think that should happen with those trees, even though the single trees that come down, then let Ben record it in his office. You know, so you have that information at the end of the year where the trees are coming down and what types of trees are coming down. So if you want to have an analysis, you have that at your fingertips.
Again, my whole point is, I don't want to make it too onerous. If a guy has a tree growing up in his septic leach field, this code lets him cut it down. If a guy's got a tree limb hanging over his house, this lets the guy cut it down. Without calling up Ben, without, you know, recording that I took a tree down. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we all, common sense, the overall goal is to establish the fact that we think trees are important. And we're not going to you know, think you're in your comfort zone now that you've got your property. And you want to just indiscriminately take things down because, as you say, you know, I got to put a pool here. Well, maybe when they were subdividing, there was a wetland there, and they made a decision to put a buffer there. So in certain contexts, post-subdivision, on major subdivisions, there should be some post-enforcement of a tree plan that was developed during subdivision. But this is not the purpose of our discussion tonight. Our discussion tonight here is the loophole that exists, and where people are not before subdivision, and they're doing indiscriminate cutting, and they're doing it under the aegis of, well, I have every right, it's my property. I think our purpose is to essentially establish that there's a public health and safety issue associated with trees, and we recognize their importance. And indiscriminately, we're not going to allow future destruction, degradation of these trees. If you want to cut down a tree because you got to put a stone wall, maybe you got to put a fence between you and your neighbor. Again, I don't want to get too far into people's lives. We got enough government regulation, pay enough taxes. We sit here and discuss enough things till all hours of the night. But to some extent, we need a protection here before subdivision. And that's our point, truly. Anything clear that we can do clearly, effectively, gets the point across, and is user-friendly, as I say. I don't necessarily want to have I mean, we on the Conservation Commission, we spend a lot of time, but it's all volunteer time. I mean, and so to some extent, you know, you're limited. We have jobs, we have other lives. But we have recognized that this particular loophole is dangerous. And it wouldn't be too much if we sat down and addressed just that. And then when it gets to the subdivision, wetlands, steep slopes, etc., you know, there's time for everything. But in the interest of time, and without whacking this, you know, to infinity, our simple purpose is to try to do something that deals with the loophole clearly and you know, as I say, without overburdening it. I don't want to overstep, and I think we have enough expertise here where we can develop the language to do just that. And Ben or any other building enforcement officer could look at the code itself, and it's prescriptive. It doesn't necessarily take a lot of imagination to enforce. As you said, tree lines, you know, I can deal with that. We don't have to measure 6 breast, you know, height, 4 breast height, you know, however it's got to be. But black and white, I think we can accomplish our mission without going too far. And then when if it's that detailed, if it gets into the DGIS, if it gets into seeker issues, then maybe you're talking about zoning, talking about planning boards, you're talking about bringing it to the next level. But my only hope here, I think, was to accomplish the loophole.
John, I would tend to agree with you. I think, you know, we could have used this law within the last 5 years, and it could have saved a lot of trees in this community.
Yes.
If something else needs to be developed afterwards, or in conjunction with, once this goes into place, I'm all for it. Some of your ideas are good, Susan, but we've waited too long.
Do it.
Let's tweak this and
Do it.
see if there's any more comments that could go with it.
Thanks.
Jerry, when I first brought this, I don't know what your plan is for tonight, but when I first mentioned this at a town board meeting recently, I really didn't intend this to be a public hearing. I thought of it more as a public workshop. So at some point, I think it would be helpful if, you know, some of the folks in the audience who might have some comments, Fran in particular, who's been through this heart-wrenching from your point of view out your back window.
There would have to be a public hearing as part of the local law.
Oh, there would for the law anyway, but I mean, as long as we're trying to put something together.
I talked to Fran earlier, and she asked me about that, and I let her know that this was just a preliminary hearing between the boards, you know, not a hearing, and actually informal discussion, public discussion. So the public gets it, it's also being filmed, and it'll be put out on the channel. But I think that with the fact that we have this put forth by the Conservation Commission, and we have a renewed interest in it, also the code that has followed through from this, we're going to make copies of it and get to all the board members and make it available then for the public. If we have meetings on that, we let everyone look at it first and see what their opinion is, basically. Then we can have another meeting like this and talk about it further on. And, you know, there will be absolutely, as Mike said, public hearings before anything is put into effect. And the public will have plenty of chances to comment publicly. Also, as I mentioned to Fran, if anyone has anything they want to submit in writing to the town, and it could be forwarded to all the boards and all the board members that are here tonight and that could make it tonight, so they can read your comments and suggestions, that would be welcomed. As well as if you want to call up the town hall, talk to any of the town board members, or any of, you know, get in contact with any of the board members, so you could let them know what your interests are on this, that would be welcomed also. So that the people here who sit before you, and also the several members who couldn't make it here tonight, could have public input, and then convene with their own boards and talk to them, separately, and then when we get back together with another document, and then we can also move forward. But I think it's just, to me, I thought it was important that we moved on to something here tonight and got the ball rolling again, because it had stalled, and we didn't feel like I said earlier, I certainly didn't feel comfortable. Some of the members of the public talked to me about it, about spending any money in any kind of review if it wasn't going anywhere. So we didn't want to waste any time or money on it. And now I think it's time to move forward. And we'll have plenty of time for public comment. Ward?
Backing up Dennis, I agree. I think some of the people out here have first-hand experience of some of the travesties that take place. And maybe we ought to have that input now rather than revise and then revise again. Well, we're still in a somewhat fluid stage. It's a lot easier to pour it into a different square container or a round container rather than have it cast and then try to break it apart and put it in some other container.
I agree, and going back to, when I mentioned it at the town board meeting a couple of sessions ago, I never intended it to be a situation where the public would be locked out. You're right, it's sort of in a fluid stage. We've talked about some things that could be enhanced a little bit, be it residential, be it commercial, site development. When it comes time to have the public hearing, and everybody who wants to speak within an hour and gets their 3 minutes of time, let's face it, at that point in time, this is going to be cast in law. This is the right time to get public input. We want to hear some practical comments about how this will work. So that when we go back and we do a rewrite, we're fortified with some more information. To me, the public hearings are a waste of time. They happen way too late in the process.
I do happen to agree with that comment on the waste of, if it's too late in the process. I also don't agree with, if you have a public hearing and there's a lot of dissension about the topic, I think that you should slow it down.
But this is a way to diffuse that. If you can get the public involved beforehand.
This was not meant to be a public comment forum, never was. It's very much in its
Well, you're within the power to open it up, let a couple people come up.
I appreciate your comment. The problem is that this is too nascent in its level. We haven't even seen the other document. So I would appreciate it if we had public comment on these before a public hearing also. But tonight, as far as I can see, it's too early in the process. But we will take public comment from anyone, written comment, and we will be able to have future meetings with the...
It's too early, folks. You're not entitled to have a comment.
Okay, then.
Yeah, well, you heard my point of view. I was the one who asked for this meeting. Is it okay?
Is it okay? What then? It's okay.
I was the one who asked to have this meeting.
Yeah.
Invite all these people. Let's let them talk.
It's a public meeting. Everyone was invited to hear as a member of the public. But we just had the comment between the different board members, and we're going to have other meetings between the board members, and maybe at a future date we'll have public comment. Right now the public hasn't even seen the other document. Some of them have just seen this for the first time. So
the other document has taken 4 years. We're not waiting any longer.
We're going to have another meeting, correct? So, may I make a suggestion? At the next meeting, we afford 1 hour before we start the meeting to have input. So it gives people a chance to review whatever you're going to put online.
Okay.
And whatever else we're going to have. Because it seems at this point, we're not going to get the public comment. I understand. But if it's too early in the process, let's have the public comment first at the next meeting.
Sounds like a good idea.
Excuse me, I'd just like to say to the public, I do have copies of our proposal up here. I didn't make a lot, but anybody is welcome to take what we have.
There's some at the front desk over there, two by the two.
Jerry, can we get those put online?
Okay, we'll have them put online for the public to look at also. On the website?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that this way people will be more informed. And we'll get more of a constructive input of where we may be missing something or if there's something else that we have left out, because the public has been very, not only supportive of us getting a tree code out and wanting us to get one out, but they also come up with great ideas, and now we have the format that's out, everybody can look over everything that's out there, and then next meeting.
Sounds like a good idea, Rick.
Jerry,
Thank you.
why don't you let Fran speak at least?
We'll have one person speak. Let Fran
Due respect,
Actually-
Jerry, no due respect, Jerry.
Okay.
I have to agree with Dennis. We've been in this process for a long time, long before you got involved, and you've been in it for a long time. And if we take 3 minutes per person to make comments, what is the harm in getting out in front?
There's no harm, but that's not what this meeting was intended. Is this lady a member of the Conservation Commission?
Yes, she is.
Okay. Then she can speak, because you were invited to the meeting to speak.
Thank you. I'm a newbie here, so
Okay, welcome.
I wasn't necessarily involved in the preliminary drafting, but since the town attorney's here, I had just a couple of questions that perhaps can be addressed as this goes through the process.
So,
One is just that when we talk about trees and right-of-ways, that we need to think about any of the roads that may be by public use or any that might be private. I don't know the extent to which we have either townhouse or multifamily developments that have private roads, and yet they may have been constructed with street trees. So we should give some thought of capturing that as well in the law. The other is the whole discussion of timber harvesting. And timber harvesting in some municipalities is actually a use, a principal use, and that it's not allowed unless it's specified in the zoning code. So I'm not sure whether Monroe in fact allows timber harvesting. Okay, so I think that if, Bonnie, I don't think that they do.
Okay, so,
Yeah, it has to be special.
special use.
Special use. Yes, so as you're looking at the regulations, to look at the definition for timber harvesting so that you don't end up doing more than what you really want to happen as far as clear cutting. A question just in terms of enforcement, because we talk about a dollar amount per offense, but my question is, what is an offense? Because you can have someone as a first offense cut, 7 trees, and then you can have someone cut 50 trees. And so should that be treated the same? Is there a way to treat it differently? Is there an acreage basis?
I think you could make each tree an offense and then have the monetary limit correspond to what the town law allows, which would be more effective than the $1,000, which may not be allowed.
Okay.
I
think that also probably we should look into if somebody clear cuts a piece of property before development, whether it's a site plan or a subdivision, for commercial use, just to circumvent the law, they should be prohibited from developing for 2 years. Something, or have some sort of a punishment in time, because for developers, time is money. So that may be more effective, that may be more of a deterrent.
Good idea.
And the other was just, we do talk about situations that are emergency and allowing tree cutting in emergency situations. And I think we need to define emergency, that it's more than just someone saying, I have an emergency, that it's bona fide, that there's some kind of declaration or announcement that, again, it's municipal or state or a county or somehow defined, so that someone doesn't indicate, well, I had an emergency, because those are the kinds of things that happen when laws are drafted.
Those are the little loopholes we don't see.
So, as far as I know, there was a discussion about, the problem that the planning board, makes all this effort to do a great plan, shows limits of disturbance, and that they're not followed. And I don't know what the planning board's practice is, but certainly to add map notes that just simply say, you can't, diverge from this plan without coming back to the planning board. And having requirements that things be staked out in advance. I mean, there's ways to control it a little more to the extent that maybe it's not being added to the plan, which is supposed to be the guide later on for tree cutting and for, right. And then just
a general reaction is that you do have your wetland law, you have your stormwater law, and you have your building management law. Each of those seem to have definitions or have statements about trees and clearing. So, you know, your consultant or attorney should just take a look at definitions to make sure everything's
Consistent.
hanging together, so.
If I may, the one thing that you brought up there at the end with the definitions, that's one of the main things that both Susan and Langdon worked on when we worked together, is the fact that the definitions and certain things are in so many different spots in the code, which is what you just brought up, that to put everything together, define everything one time, and then just refer back to that definition from then on throughout the code, makes the code a lot easier, and if there is any kind of challenge to anything, you have one list of definitions, so your point has been looked at, and it's a great point.
I'd like to point out also that this is 10 pages, and the plan that Susan Roth had been working on is 114 pages, and this should be a public document. So I'd like to get this out so that everybody can get a good look at it before we meet again, and so everybody can refer to this.
Now, the document you have there, Dan, has actually been through the building inspector, his meetings with Susan and myself, and then Susan has been even updated with his input to make things more enforceable, because as I think Rick said earlier, or someone said earlier, you can put every law you want on the books, but you have to make it in such a way that it can be enforced properly and fairly. So there is another version, we will be putting it out there for everybody within the next couple of weeks. We'll have another meeting where everyone will have seen that, and when they put their public comments in, they'll be aware of it.
Yeah, I'd like that out.
Okay.
Everybody can take a look at it.
Very nice. Great idea. Anyone else on
A question,
tree code?
a question from Mike. Something young lady just said, put a thought in my mind. The planning board, when they are approving a site plan, will insist on notes. And some of those notes will have things to do with the trees and et cetera. Mike, is there any way that we can include some of those or all of those notes as part of the bonding process?
That's what, and by the way, John, it's chapter 36, that's what, no, well, I mentioned it in passing before. We have a chapter 36 of the code tied into, in both the subdivision regulations and the zoning chapter, that attempts to do just that. That brings in the conditions of the planning board approval into a document called a public improvement security agreement. So we have an additional remedy and method of enforcement that's contractual. It includes financial security of various kinds, performance, maintenance, and restoration security, which is often the most important that many municipalities don't have. I think that chapter is underutilized. It was probably enacted at a time when development pressures were tailing off and we didn't have any projects that went beyond the approval stage to be built, but I think it may be an answer to some of these concerns.
Mike, does the town engineer, is he the one responsible for enforcing the trees?
Not necessarily. That chapter allows the hiring of independent experts to oversee.
So maybe that's something that should be addressed.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments from the boards?
Gary? Jerry, I have one. Going back to the comments that Susan made concerning the definition of clearing, she mentioned that removal of 6 more trees within 1/2 acre within a 12-month period. Exactly when does the clock start on that?
That's a rolling
Well, that was just one of the things that the building inspector pointed out as far as like how he could interpret it, get around interpreting it. And, you know, one of the processes that we go through when we're going through codes is we go to different individuals and we try to understand what their thinking would be when they read this document. And that's one of the points that he made. And he said, really, even 6 trees in a 1/2 acre area, that's a lot of trees, and especially if they're 24-inch trees. I mean, and if you think about it from my backyard perspective again, it's probably half the trees in my backyard are 20% slope.
That's 20-inch diameter.
I guess the most important thing is at what time does the clock start for that 12-month period?
That's correct. That was the question that he asked.
We can also expand that.
So maybe that's something we can plan for the next revision.
Well, no, I think that you should just say one tree in a 12-month period. You know, or, yeah, or in a calendar year or something like that, because that's
And it's
very
12 months.
clear.
Well, we may not be using a calendar year, like you say, you can go from December to January.
Do
All
it
of a
12
sudden, you have
months.
12 trees gone, is
Right.
because the clock starts when you cut your first tree down, which might be April, and then it goes 12 months. So I
Right.
think we need to kind of work on that little area a little bit more.
Right, yes,
Subtle
yes, and then
nuances we
lessen
have
the
to
number
work
of
on.
trees.
That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from the board? The boards, I should say. We're gonna have to, what we're gonna do is we have a couple of small, and we have some attorney-client issues that we're gonna go back into actually executive session attorney-client, because this is a town board meeting. I just want to thank all the board members who were here tonight for your input and your time and your efforts. There will be another version, as Dan mentioned, it's longer than this version. It's been worked on for, off and on for several years by different members of the board and different professionals. So everyone's going to get that information before we meet again. And we'll have other meetings in which the public will, as Rick said, maybe we'll have public comment before we start, if that's what the board decides. And we'll have some public input with a little more information. Plus all the people at home who are watching this or who want to look on the web to have this roughly 10-page document be put on the website and be available at town hall if you want to come get it that way, if you don't deal with the computers that well. And you can get that information, look it over, and if you don't want to come to a meeting, if you want to just write into the town, call in, or ask to speak to some of the board members, we'll have them get in touch with you, and you can make your comments and your opinions known, and we'll move forward from there. But thank you, everyone who came here. Thank you for the public for coming. We're going to take a brief 5-minute recess so the people who are not concerned with the town board issues here, the other members on the panel want to leave. We'll have plenty of time to do it. We'll reconvene in 5 minutes. Okay, thank you, everyone, for coming out. We just let people come around who were just here for the tree code discussion. Okay, now that we have the quorum and everything, I need a motion to pay the bills.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Discussion? Call the question?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm still not on it. No, I'm still not on it. I'm still,
Testing 1, 2, 3.
no, we're not testing.
It's still not,
There you go.
Got it.
Okay. The town comptroller has a list of budget amendments and transfers that we got today. And I'd like to read the first one. In the 2015 budget for Water District 8, there's an expense for a gap closure in the amount of $65,000. This expense is a placeholder to pay back a loan to the B fund and make an additional payment to the band principal for the water tank and water mains. This is Water District 8.
Right.
Can I have a motion for that? And
Lucky thing we don't have to
Well,
see.
a second for discussion? Can we have a motion and a second for
I'll make the motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, Peter?
The two things that are on here is an interfund transfer from Water District 8 to the capital fund to pay the loan. And the second, and that's $27,635.02. And the next appropriation of $37,364.98 is to increase the principal payment on the ban, which is due here in about 2 weeks.
Okay, so that first paragraph there was including both those
It
two.
includes those two things, it's all
Now-
fits together.
Peter, you should make them as separate motions perhaps, because we have different budget lines. Okay, so then,
You
we're
could,
just gonna move on to the actual separate motions. We'll make them separately so they're easier to follow.
so just do the interfund transfer and then do the appropriation.
Okay, I got it, thank you for explaining that. The interfund transfer of $27,635.02 from SW08-9901-9000-00 to 8020-5031. This will allow HO20 to pay back a loan from the B fund. Can I have a motion to that effect?
I'll make that motion for.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Discussion? Call to question?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the second one of that batch would be to appropriate, $37,364.98 from SW08 fund balance to SW08-9730-6000-01 BAN ban principal water tank project. Can I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Call to question?
Aye.
Okay, now on a separate issue then, we have a proposed transfer of $175 from A000-1990-0000-00 A fund contingency to A000-1420-4000-02 bond council. Do we have a motion to that effect?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Peter?
I miscalculated the amount of money that the bond council was going to charge for the ban that we took out.
Okay.
And since it's coming from contingency, I don't like to make movements of funds out of contingency without having to approve it,
Okay.
even though it's a small amount of money.
All right, it's clear then.
For 175, correct?
Okay. Discussion from the board? Call to question.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, transfer $2,257.22 from A000-1990-0000-00 A fund contingency to A000-1950-4000-00 taxes and assessments on town property. Can I get a motion for that?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, Peter?
Yeah.
Okay, this was actually the first time that I took a look at these taxes that we're paying. I know it's funny.
Yeah.
I appreciate how funny it is, 'cause, I don't understand why the town is paying sewer district 9 acre taxes on the Monroe Park. We need to look into that. It's been done in the past and just hasn't been questioned. And since I broke taxes out on a separate line item this year, they came out and hit us between the eyes that, okay, we're paying more taxes than we thought we were paying. So that's what this is. This amount represents taxes paid to Sewer District 9 for the acreage charge in that sewer district, basically on the park property.
Peter,
Yes, sir.
who are we paying the taxes to?
Those are taxes actually that are paid to the sewer district.
It's still funny.
So we're paying them to the sewer district from the town.
Because we get use of their land?
Because we do have a sewer connection on the park.
Okay.
Now, I think that we should be set up here as a user and not as acreage. The town is not going to develop that park. It's not vacant land, it's not land to be developed anymore. And I believe it's been this way since the town bought the property.
How long ago was that?
It's more than 5 years. As long as we own the Monbasha parkland.
But we're paying taxes on it.
Apparently, we've been paying.
But we're a municipality, how can we be paying taxes on parks?
Well, if we have sewer connections, we do pay. Just like we pay Orange County number 1 for sewer connections on some of the properties that we own. So that's on the tax bill. It's a sewer district, but it's a charge on the tax bill, but it's really a sewer usage charge.
Right, that's a sewer usage charge.
But we should be charged as a user and not, I think we should be charged as a user and not as acreage. This is the first time I'd seen the tax bill. As I said, these things were kind of floating around in the past. We pulled it out this year so that they're on a line, so that we saw the charges explicitly. And this is what we're faced with.
And as you know, as we go into the future and correct this, who would we be negotiating with?
Well, it's a question that I'm going to ask Wednesday night when we have a MUDA meeting,
Okay,
and it's a question that I'm going to ask the assessor.
okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that being said, thanks for clarifying that. Any more discussion from the board? Call the question?
Aye.
Okay, there's three more here for 2014 funds is the heading. Appropriate $2,376.54 from SL00 fund balance to SL00-5182-4210-00 street lighting expense. Can you make a motion to that?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Peter?
Again, the 2014 budget was this short in what the lighting district had to pay. In the meantime, you've signed an agreement with the supplier of electricity, so that we're now paying a lower electric supply charge, and that has actually allowed us to even decrease the tax levy for the lighting district for 2015. So this is this amount caught us when our previous electric supplier, because we didn't up the contract with them, we'd gone out, the town went out for bid. It took a while to conclude that process. And in that time during which we were concluding that process, the previous supplier just jacked the rate up to like 3 times what we were paying, and that created the overage in the street lighting expense. This money is in the fund balance, and it's in the fund balance of the street lighting district. So it's it's not, the town's not giving money to the district. It's just appropriating funds from the fund balance to pay this.
And how much more is this?
$2,376.54.
Peter, how much is in fund balance, do you know?
The fund balance was like 19,000.
For SL00?
Yeah, the SL00.
So because we didn't negotiate, we have to pay the overage.
Well, we got, our rates were, our supply charges were tripled by the time we got to the point where we signed the new contract with supply.
Did that negate any of the savings we had, or?
Well, going forward, we get savings, but, probably eat up some of the savings we had from the previous contract. We went up to 18 cents from 6.
Seems like we got out in the nick of time.
Well, we're in better shape than we were.
Okay, any more discussion from the board? Call the question?
Aye.
Aye. There's a second one, is appropriate $254.32 from SW07 fund balance to SW07-8340-4109-00 miscellaneous expenses. Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Peter?
This is just the miscellaneous expenses were just that much more than what we'd anticipated in the budget. SW07 has about $20,000 in fund balance. So,
Okay.
And the money is coming out of the district. It's not coming from anywhere else, and it's not a loan or anything like that.
Okay. Anyone have a comment from the board? Call the question?
Aye.
Aye. By the way, I just want to make one comment after we voted on it, is over the last several years, the town has made it a much better practice, in my opinion, even from the previous board that I've been on with Sandy and Jim, that we really separated, and a lot of it had to do with Peter Martin. We separated things where things in the past had been done improperly, not by design, but I'm sure by just standard practice or past practice. And now we actually have things separated where these special districts are paying for what they get, and aside from loans, which they pay back, things are separated the right way now, which we're all happy to see. So thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much. And by the way, we will At the next meeting, we'll make a final transfer for Water District 2. And what that will mean is that now coming into 2015, all of the water districts will have paid back all the money that they borrowed from the B fund. So
that's great.
We'll be where law says we're supposed to be.
That's great news. Thank you. We have one more. To appropriate $6,369.50 from FEMA Reserve to pay for FEMA repairs to Berry and Ludlam. Can I have a motion for that?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Peter?
Berry and Ludlam, there was a culvert out there that got replaced, and a head wall, and along the way we kept having, there's another one of these projects that was started without the highway superintendent coming to us and saying, I have this project that's going to cost $15,000 and I need a purchase order to cover what we're going to do. So bills, invoices have been coming in piecemeal, unexpectedly, because we had no idea what was going on. And it would be a bill from TATS, and then there'd be a bill for cement, and then there'd be a bill from TATS for asphalt, and then there'd be a bill from a contractor for doing some work. And these things all kind of like kept piecemeal flowing in because no one followed the highway superintendent didn't follow the procurement policy, and we had no idea about what work was going on, so we couldn't plan to do this earlier in the year. So it's cleaning up out of reserve funds. It's to, if we didn't make this transfer, there's a DB fund that would be negative by $6,369.50.
Is this a FEMA repair?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Any other comments from the board on that?
Yeah, and I understand you instituted this purchase system, and that you're tightening it this year.
Extremely.
Especially in regard to highway. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, judging from my discussions with Peter about purchases, I'd have to say he's tightening it everywhere, which is good. So that Peter will have a better handle on purchases before they happen, and to make sure that they follow New York State, accounting principles, and keep everyone informed of what's actually going on. So I think it's a great thing.
Well, thank you. And if I may, the major vendors that supply the highway department are all now very much aware of the fact that they are not allowed to accept verbal orders, and that any order that's placed without a town purchase order is one that I'm not honoring. So I got their attention, and they want to work with us because they like it too, because it's easier for them. They can send the invoice to me once the purchase order is opened, match up the invoice with the purchase order, and they get paid. And piles of invoices don't go on the negotiation table in the highway department and sit there and languish for 6 months while somebody decides, are we going to try to get this for less money or not? So it's better all around.
Yes, plus it keeps the vendors having to do business in a straight up fashion.
Absolutely.
All right, so that being said, any other comments from the board? Call the question.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's it on the budgetary amendments and transfers, Mr. Martin?
Yes, it is. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
You're welcome, thank you. I'd like to have a motion to adjourn to executive session, attorney-client. We have 4 executive session issues and 2 attorney-client. 2 of the, actually 3 of the executive session things have to do with positions with the county, Orange County Civil Service, and other issues with the movie theater. And one has to do with, something in the financial department itself. And then in the attorney-client, we have a movie theater issue, and also an issue on our town board meetings and certain protocols that have to be adhered to in order to keep what we would call a civil tone in our meetings and to control the times when there are certain outbursts in the audience or certain language used. We want to try and make it a pleasant experience for every member of the town to come to, and also safe for our employees, who we are obligated to protect, as well as members of the community and ourselves. So thank you. Can I get a motion to that effect?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay,
Can I get a clarification of why we're going into executive session? I didn't hear one of the 8 reasons.
One of the what?
One of the 8 reasons that the
Actually-
state says we can go to executive session.
Okay. We're going to discuss, some which we'll discuss out in public also, but we're going to discuss something about 3 things with the movie theater, let's see, and 1 thing with something with the financial department, the personnel. And anything we discuss, we can bring out here and discuss with the public also before we make any motion. I don't know if we're going to make any motions, but if we do, obviously we can make them out here.
I'm okay with the personnel issue, but the movie theater,
Okay?
is it another contract or something?
No, it's actually, we're going to have to talk about how we're going to create positions as far, and we'll talk about this in public too, Dennis. I just want to give everyone a heads
It's
up.
personnel, actually.
It's personnel, but it's to create positions with Orange County Civil Service, and there's certain titles they've told our department that we have to adhere to. So it's a little different than the typical
talk about that in public.
type of positions that I would have thought they would have been, which I had a question on. And I also want to ask the attorney about it. So that's why we're going in. And we'll discuss everything right out front, and before I make a vote, you can make any comments you want.
The thing is with personnel, you have to be talking about an individual, and the reason you would go into executive session to discuss that individual so is that their reputation is not harmed in public by some off-the-cuff comments or something that may be inappropriate. But to talk about job classifications, I don't believe that qualifies under the state law.
Okay. And we'll also ask the attorney about that, and whatever has to be discussed in public, as always, will be. Okay? So we already made the motion, called the question? Aye.
Nay.
Yeah, I'll make a motion, we return to public session.
Call the question?
Aye.
Okay. We're back in public session. We have 1 issue to bring forth. I would ask one of the councilmen if they would. We're going to hopefully have a motion to create 12 positions for part-time watchmen to be employed at the Monroe TMACC, Town Monroe Arts and Civic Center. And these positions have to be created at the Orange County Civil Service. So this is just to create the positions. We've been advised that from the town supervisor earlier today, probably 8 positions will be advertised, but some of the councilmen felt that we should create 12 positions so that we have them if we need to fill them. If someone leaves, someone doesn't pass the background check or whatever kind of information we get from them after they apply to the job. Those jobs will be advertised in the paper. They will be part-time jobs, and they will have the salaries to be determined later. We're not even at that point, we're just looking to create the position. So, do I have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion, and then we can discuss it so the public will go across.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion? Guys?
Oh, we can talk?
Yeah, we could, no. The title watchman was what civil service gave us. The work that they would be doing is, we thought it would be recreation aid. And they would be working at the theater, they would be ticket takers, they would be at the concession stand. The 3 screens will be operated by Brian Burke and the Downing Film Center, and he would be hiring 3 or 4 people as managers, assistant managers. But the rest of the work there has to be done by town staff. So that's why we need these people there, because we're going to have to pick up our end of it. So we'll advertise for it, we'll interview the people, we'll do the hiring, and we'll see what kind of schedule we have to devise for them.
What are the business plan?
How many watch guards do you have now? Do you currently have
Do you
a
have
number?
anything?
No,
Dennis?
to clarify it's just a title. This is the civil service title that's being designated by Orange County. It absolutely makes no sense if you just listen to the title. Personally, I'd like to see the job description that goes with watchman or watch person.
Right, because in September you had 11 watch guards.
The other piece, I can understand trying to get the titles in place so that at some point we allocate some money to budget for their salaries. But on the other hand, if we keep this process rolling, we're never going to be looking at a budget. We'll never have a plan. So while I agree that you have to do something with civil service, you know, I made a mistake and I voted for Downing Film Festival without a budget, and I kind of went back on what I said I was going to be in favor of, and that's to have a plan. I'm going to vote no on this one because we're going to force a plan.
Will they be armed watchmen?
No,
Anyway,
no, these would just be ticket takers
Okay.
and concession people, but that's, you
It's
know,
not public comment.
it's a strange title.
It's a strange title for what normally would be called recreation aid.
Okay.
The Orange County Civil Service advised the town on this matter, and that's what they told us we have to be. So that being said, I think that we should move forward and create the titles just in case we fill them, or fill them with 8 people perhaps. I think it's a mistake not to fill the title. There is budgetary work done by Peter Martin, which has, he's going over with Brian Burke now, and Brian Burke is going to iron out the budget with Peter, and he's an industry expert. So Peter will be putting out into public with the town board's approval, and also Brian Burke's advisement on a budget, or what we call, any kind of budget you come up with is an estimate. And now the first year of any business is usually the slowest. What happens is Peter's numbers that he's plugged in are very conservative. He hasn't gone as, I'd say, aggressive in filling seats. He's been on the low end of it. So with budgetary numbers he showed us in the past, I think are pretty reasonable. And he's going to go over that with Brian Burke and make sure that he's got the right idea. And then Peter will be showing everyone a budget. I hope at the next maybe April 6th meeting, and then people will see the general idea of the budget and what do you call I call them estimates, and educated estimates at that, because he did check with industry standards throughout the nation on filling seats per show and per cinema. But Brian will know even more about that than Peter does, so we want to double check with Brian about that. So I'm going to, I guess Dennis made his vote known, but I'm going to ask that we bring it to a vote just so it's public.
Yeah. Dennis's objection is that we're doing this piecemeal, and I can see where that would make a financially conservative person nervous, because you don't know how many tickets are going to be sold, you don't know how much money is coming in. So I can see where he'd rather have a budget plan and some structure. We're gonna need this many people, this is the hours they're gonna work, and it'd be nice to have that all ahead of time. But we signed the contract with Brian Burke of Downing Film Center last week. He's going to, he and his organization will run the 3 screens downstairs. And we think it'll take about 6 weeks to get up and running. So we're looking at, one, asking civil service to create these positions, which we know will lead when the theater opens. Maybe that takes a week or more. And then we have to put an ad in the paper, and maybe that's a week or more. We have to have the people come in, we have to interview them. So we're looking at that 6 weeks till opening night, or opening day. We're seeing some time pressure here. But I think, you know, we're gonna, looks like we're gonna have maybe 2 aye votes and 1 no vote, so it will not pass. So we'll just have to go over this a little more carefully and you know, bring it up again on April the 6th. And maybe we'll have some more information, and maybe Dennis will join us.
Okay, hopefully by then the budget will be put together better and able to be seen by the public and by the councilman too. This is not going to bring it. Call the question.
Yeah, let's have a
Can you
vote.
speak a little
Call
louder?
the question. Aye?
Aye.
No.
No.
Okay, that's 2 and no, so the vote does not carry. So that the positions cannot be created at this time.
We need 3 votes.
You need 3 votes. Okay, any other business that wants to bring up? No? Okay. Do I have a,
And then Dennis had thought, because we're not talking about personnel, meaning people and their work histories, et cetera, it didn't have to be in executive
We can't
session.
hear you.
Can you speak up?
Okay. Dennis said, suggested, since we weren't talking about personnel people who, about their work histories and their names and stuff like that, it didn't have to be in executive session. And in discussing it in executive session, he was correct. But so we had, and this is what we had this discussion in public. So everybody's heard what what we said inside. And we were, the first reaction was we want recreation aides, and civil service says they got to be watchmen. So that takes a few minutes of shock to figure out why. Yeah, watchmen.
as civil service, they make the rules, we don't.
Yeah.
Okay, that being said, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second, anyone?
I'll second that.
Okay, call the question?
Aye.
Aye. Good night, everybody, thank you for staying.
Just so you guys know.